Welcome to What in the World, a project initiated by Hungry for Life International. Today's podcast is titled, What Does It Take to End Violence? And Jess will be interviewing Debbie Davidson, a nurse who has been leading teams for 10 years. So grab your headphones, sit back, relax, and listen as she shares about how her team of nurses has taught communities on what it means to end violence.
Hello, and welcome back to another week of What in the World podcast, where we talk about all things to do with global nonprofits. We have Debbie Davidson here today. Hello, Debbie.
Hi.
Thanks for racing over on your lunch hour.
That's okay.
This is really great. So Debbie Davidson has been I will call you a local partner. That's the terminology I guess we use.
Mm-hmm.
A local partner of Hungry for Life for how many years now?
10 years.
10 years. That's a long time.
Yeah.
A whole decade.
10 years. Yeah.
And we will get into the group in a minute, but can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, first of all, what do you do? Where did you just come from?
I work as a nurse, as a clinical resource nurse with home health and home support here in Goshulak. So I work part-time with them, having sort of semi-retired 5 years ago from managing a nursing home in town. So yeah.
And your family's around here?
Yes. Yeah. I've got 4 daughters, and they all live close, and 3 grandchildren. Yeah. And I've been, like I said, been involved with Hungry for Life for 10 years. It's hard to believe that this is our 10th year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
How long have you been a nurse for?
I've been in 40 plus years, 45 years. Yeah. Yeah.
So you've seen a lot.
Yes. Yeah.
You've been a nurse through the pandemic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so being a nurse has sort of spurred on what you have partnered with Hungry for Life to do. So Debbie and her group are called EVE, which is
Ending Violence Educators.
Yes. And they, can you tell a little bit of the EVE story? How did it get started? Why did it get started?
Yeah.
What's the purpose?
Yeah. Part of my journey in nursing, I think when my middle daughter, who is now in her 40s or early 40s, when I was pregnant with her, I actually started working with victims of violence, and primarily through the Red Cross at that point. And then it sort of evolved into working with community services, where I developed some programs for victims of violence called Escape Ending Violence within families, and also victim services going into courts and such like that. And it evolved further from that I became part of a forensic nursing team out of Abbotsford Regional Hospital, where we provided basic health care and support services to victims who had gone to the police, or possibly not even to the police, that come to the hospital as a victim of usually rape. But occasionally it was, interpersonal violence in the home. One of our nurses was Jackie Edinburgh at that time.
Right. Okay.
And Jackie had just started working with Hungry for Life, and she was talking about some of her missions trips overseas into Africa, and I think it was primarily Kenya at that point. She went, and a few of us expressed an interest in, this is something that we've always wanted to do, and my kids were more grown at that point, so there was an opportunity for me to be able to do something like that. And she says, well, the information and the experience that you've got would be really valuable to take over into some of these communities where sexual assault is just not spoken about. And so that started it. That was in 2011. And we spent a year developing what we hoped was some culturally sensitive information that we could bring over there. And we developed a framework. And at that point, we called it the SANE Project, Sexual Assault Nurse Examiners. And so our first trip was to Kenya in 2012, in March of 2012. We had no idea what we were doing at that point. Well, Jackie did. And I remember Jackie just sort of saying, just go with it. It'll all work out. And we went over with all of these plans. I remember the very first session that we did over in Kenya. I had, because I like to be organized, so I had a pack of name tags that we could put on all the children, so that we'd be able to speak to them by name instead of just, sort of talking to them by a group. And we arrived at the school an hour and a half late because nothing was ever on time.
Of course.
And we couldn't get in the driveway, in the closed driveway to it, and so we had to dig our truck out of there. And so we finally got there, and there was 500 children. And I only had 20 name tags, I think, or something like that. So at that point, we realized that, most of the plans we had made were not going to really work. But it was an amazing, amazing experience. There was 12 of us that went. I think that every one of us, our lives were changed with that very first trip that we made to Kenya. But we learned a lot at that point. And so since that time, we have basically, other than the years with the pandemic, we have done a trip every year. Mm-hmm. We have been to Uganda 3 times. We have been to Guatemala, Baja, Mexico, and Haiti. And with every trip, we've learned a little bit more, and we've refined a little bit more what we have done.
So, with having been to 4 different countries,
yes, yeah.
Is there one thing that stands out as like a consistency among violence victims? Or is it quite different per country? Like, does violence present itself in different ways?
It does present itself slightly different, right? Depending on the culture within that community. But part of what has always been very, very important to our team is that we are not going over there and telling them what to do. We're going over there curious. We're going over there to learn from them. We're going over there for them to tell us what are the concerns or the problems within their community. And then they develop, through conversation, they develop a plan to be able to address it. So, for example, in Guatemala, a lot of the violence is brought about not only by poverty. Poverty is always one of the main cruxes of it, but it's also the machismo culture and the cartel there. So, and that was also the same thing in Baja, Mexico as well. So that was a really a stark overriding one of the roots of violence in those communities. Uganda and in Africa in the whole, a lot of it is because it's a culture where children don't have a lot of power. Actually, in most of the countries, children don't have a lot of power, so they can be easily taken care of. Kids don't say no, and because of the poverty, there's no options for them. There's no options for women as well. So.
You, like, just to give our listeners a bit of context to what you guys actually do, it's so incredible. I love what you guys do. You're all about empowerment and education. And do you want to share a bit about, like, your game plan going into trips?
Yeah. We do. We've got a framework that we usually work with, and it changes every time we go. There's sort of 3 areas that we focus on. And the one is the community leadership, where we do this last trip we did 3 days worth of leadership training with our field partners. They invite, sometimes we've had politicians, we've had police officers, we've had principals from the schools, we've had church leaders, pastors, teachers, and we bring them to a day of training and basically just engage them in conversations about what is happening in their community, and bring them through a process of them identifying what are the things that are going on in your community that concern you surrounding violence. They brainstorm that, then we break them into groups, and they choose one of the areas that is a concern in their community, and then they start developing plans. By the end of the 1 day or 2 days or 3 days, however long we work on it, they go away with a plan and some small steps that they can start with in their community to try and combat violence or whatever is going on in their community.
So what draws them there? Like, why would they take time out of their day to come learn about violence? Like, what do you think is the drawing card for them?
I think a lot of it is because they're hungry for change. I think for some of them is because they're paid.
Okay.
Like something as simple as that we need to entice them to take time out of their day.
Who pays them?
We do.
Okay. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Way to go.
Yeah. Sometimes we do.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't.
Yeah.
You might want to cut that out. It's just we pay them for their mileage and such like that because it's valuable.
It's influence.
We're valuing their, like we're saying that you are the community leaders.
Yeah.
We feel that you are the people that can make a change in your community.
Yeah.
We're not going to come here and tell you what to do.
Yeah.
But we're going to value your time taking away from your job. It might be as simple as just paying transportation.
Hey, I don't think we need to edit anything because I think that it's super important to go to the lengths you need to go to get the people of influence in a discussion like this within their own community.
And when we go back, like initially when we first started going to countries, we would only go once, and then the next year we go to somewhere else. We are now going back to the same communities again. So those same people that came the first time, they have now recognized the value, and so they come voluntarily now. Like it's not something that they have to be convinced that this is something that they really need. So they will come voluntarily. But I think that just valuing their time, valuing their expertise, and sort of saying to them, we think that you're really important, that your voice is really important, because they expect to come and be told what to do, right? That's
why do you think they think that?
I think that's the way they're taught in school. I think a lot of the education in a lot of the third world countries, kids and adults are taught by rote, right? You learn by memorization. You sit in a classroom and you're told what to do. And I remember the first time in Kenya when we were asking them, well, tell us something. It took us a long time to draw them out. And they said, nobody's ever asked us our opinions before, right? And we're saying, no, we really value your opinions. We can't, we're just here to actually help you facilitate changes that you see are necessary in your community. So valuing them was really, really important, and recognizing that they have the answers for their community. We don't have the answers. They do. Because I think that if we go over there, especially in a short-term mission, when you're going, and that was one of our fears, what are we going to do in 2 weeks, right? What's going to happen in 2 weeks? And are we going to cause more harm than good? And if we were to go over there and to sort of say, okay, this is what we did in Canada. So I could talk about what I did when I set up programs with community service and stuff like that. It's not going to work over there, right? Because that doesn't fit their culture. It doesn't fit what they need. So we don't do that. We ask them what they see as necessary. Right? One of the first ones that we did is there was a group that was going to combat idle youth. Now, how much does that have to do with violence? It does, but that's what they identified, is that they've got these boys that are idle, they don't have any jobs, so what can we do to actually keep these boys engaged in school or in different activities in their community so that they're not going to go after the girls, right? And how can we get them to come? We can get them maybe to come to a soccer game, and in that soccer game we can talk to them about respecting women, right? So they came up with these kind of suggestions. We didn't, because if we were to go over there and to say this is what you need to do, it wouldn't work. And that's also disrespectful to them to do that. I feel.
Such good point. And I want to remember what you just said, because I want to create a little like teaser video for this podcast with what you just said there. But that we don't come up with the solutions, they do. And so my sister-in-law, Ashley, who was on your trip with you. Oh, we talked a lot about you.
Okay.
No, the trip in general. But what she said that she learned from you was you would ask a question and then just be quiet and just wait for them to come up with their answers. And that stood out to her as a really effective way of getting a community involved. And I thought that was so neat that you were smart enough to know that us Americans don't have the answers just given the context of any situation like that. So I think that's really neat. Have you noticed So you go into a country for first. How many countries have you doubled up on so far? Uganda.
This is the third trip. We've been to Guatemala 3 times.
Okay.
Baja was just once, and Haiti was just once.
Kenya?
Kenya just once.
Okay. So you've done 2 countries 3 times.
Yes.
And then 3 countries 1 time.
Yes.
Oh, you're a seasoned traveler. Talk me through the first, second, and third time of Uganda and Guatemala. Like, I'm sure it was different, but let's talk Uganda because it's fresh in your mind. So the first time, was that your first trip ever?
No.
Okay.
No, Kenya was my very first trip.
Okay. All right. So the first time you went to Uganda, compared to the second, compared to the third, what was the feel like? What was the response like, as far as even attendance, as far as the women feeling empowered, even the men feeling empowered, all those things? How did you notice a change from the first to the third?
I think the first time every time we go to a country, the first time, and it was the same in Uganda, is that we're trying to find our footage. We're trying to understand the culture, and so we're much more tentative, right? Sort of sitting back a lot more, understanding what is culturally sensitive for us to talk about, what isn't. And you don't have any of those connections with the people, with the field partners necessarily, because they don't always trust us, right? I'll go to Guatemala for a second. Sure. The very first time we went to Guatemala, Pastor Tono and Merari, who were the pastors there, they were absolutely petrified because we had sent them all of our materials, and we use, like, we've got a whole training program that we use when we talk to kids, when we talk to women, when we talk to community groups, but we don't use it all. And we have that as a framework. They were petrified that we were going to come in there and talk about, tell their women to go on birth control, and talk about AIDS and all this sort of stuff. And we had to spend quite a bit of time with the field partners initially, sort of explaining,
talking them off the ledge a little bit. Okay.
Yeah, and explaining that no, we basically take our lead from who we're talking to, and if they ask a question about birth control, we will answer them. But otherwise, we will always refer to the field partners or to them and find out what is culturally sensitive for us to talk about. And so that was the same thing when the first time we went to Uganda. Okay. That we went to, the first time we went to Noah's Ark, which was a children's ministry, and then we went to His Hope Uganda. So we went to the two different places, and it was very, we did our workshop. There was a little bit of suspicion. It takes a little bit more time to build trust with them. The second time we went, we had already developed a relationship at His Hope Uganda, and so it felt like going home. And they had already listened to what we had done, guardian training with them. There was already a group that was still set up from the previous time. So we were able to go back and check with, it was a gentleman by the name of Mr. Titus, who actually stood up at the end of our leadership training, and he says, I'll start a group. And so he was able to meet with us and tell us everything that he had done. He gave me a whole booklet of
amazing,
all of his, like how he had he had employed like 20 women in micro industries, and they were utilizing, they'd printed off all the training that we had done, and he had empowered a number of different women in his community that went from community to community and talked to people about violence prevention and respect and such like that. So it was really quite cool to see that he'd taken the information that we'd given him and actually taken that and actually multiplied it within this community. And he also said that families and women and such like that were coming to him now and sort of saying, this is happening to me and my family, and I need some help. So there was resources being developed, and so that was huge.
Yeah,
right.
So, and that was the second time you.
That was the second time we went.
Okay.
This last time that we went, we didn't go to His Hope, Uganda. We primarily focused on Peace Portal with Pastor Michael. He's an absolutely amazing man, and we deepened our relationship with him. He was with us for the full 2 weeks that we were there. There wasn't a day that we didn't spend with him, and which is unusual, like for a field partner to be that as involved as he is. They went from the first time we went there, we did 1 day of training. And at the end of that day, we split into 3 groups, and they each of the 3 groups came up with a plan. One of them was to have a piggery. The other one,
I heard about the piggery.
I know. The other one was they were going to be doing community education with youth, and I can't remember what the third one was at that point. But they developed all these plans, and so when he sent us the update before we went, those groups, which were maybe numbered about 15 people, maybe there was 5 people in each of those groups, are now 6 groups, and each of those groups are anywhere between 30 to 60 people in each group. And so they, some of the stories that we heard, and like I said, people were clamoring to come to the training. I think we had 70 leaders in the training that came, and they gave us all their reports, and they developed, okay, what's the next stage now? What are they going to do? And they developed all of it. Was amazing. Like the richness of going back to the same place. Yeah. And they don't need us there all the time. They call themselves Eve groups.
They do.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the piggery is still there.
Okay, can we circle back to the piggery for a second?
Yes, yeah.
So I heard that Angela, Angela Gertzen, who we've heard from a couple times on the podcast, who's our director of TPS, went on this trip, and her and her husband are pig farmers as well. Yeah. And so she was frantically calling Chad, her husband, trying to figure out a plan to present to these... Yes. to this group of community leaders who... So why a piggery?
It's because it combats poverty.
Okay, and essentially that is the root cause of violence. Okay, got it.
So that's what they decided on. So again, a lot of it, and this is where it comes from, is that they don't need to just be lectured on how to treat women or not to rape or any of these things that come out. They don't need that sort of lecturing. They need a way to be able, so that men can provide for their families, so that single mothers can provide for their children.
Not just the
so they need all of that information. But in amongst all of that, so one of the groups that was running the piggery, it was a husband and wife that stood up, and they said, prior to 2018, when we came the last time, so we heard some of these stories, like we fought all the time. Like, I hit my wife all the time. He says, it was a way of life for us, and our lives were spiraling. We had no money. Our children were starving. And and the guy, I never felt like a man. And he says, we haven't fought since then. And they stood up and they had their arms around each other, and
That's so cool.
It was amazing. We had another guy that stood up and talked about violence that he had experienced as a child, and he was able to cry, and he was able to feel supported by the group. So there was, it's hard, and like I said, and then we asked them, okay, so what do you need from us? Like, what do you want us to talk about? And so, I'm a nurse. I'm not a business major or anything like that. They wanted business planning, and they heard that Angela had a pig farm. And so they wanted Angela to do
a business
plan on how to run a piggery. So she did. So
I'm sure she nailed it.
She did. She did so well. She absolutely nailed it.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's one of the things that happens on a personal level, and for the team as well. And this team was pretty incredible, because there were 6 of us, and 5 of us had been before, and recognize that that we will be, through these trips when we're doing this, that we will be given the tools that we need to be able to speak to whatever we need to speak to, even if it is about piggery and about, you know, like I said,
There might be a spirit leading that.
Well, it is.
Thing,
It's like we've talked all along about, actually going back to Kenya, the very first time when I went to Kenya, and I think we were all kind of, oh my gosh, what are we doing here? What right do we have? We don't feel like we've got the voice to be able to do this. And we were doing our first leadership training, and somebody in the group asked a really difficult question. I can't remember what it was about at this point. And Jackie stood up and answered it. And that night, we were talking to, the team was talking to Jackie, and we're saying, where did that come from? Like, how did you know what to say, right? How did you know how to answer that in such a way? And she says, well, she says, it came from God. And she says, I was told, you know, it came to me. And we have, regardless of the team, regardless of what faith they come from, regardless of what their beliefs are, that has resonated through every trip we've done, through every person that has come on the trip. It's just, like, I'm very nervous talking in front of a microphone here, right? And put a camera in my face and such like that, and I'm very nervous. I can stand up in front of 200 people and talk over there, and it's just the words come. You know, so, and it's sort of like,
God knows what they need to hear.
You let go, and you let God, and you just allow the words to flow, and it's amazing. And if you speak from the heart, and like I said.
Well, based on my conversation with Ashley, it came through a lot from you and other team members.
It's the whole team. It's the whole team.
You're a very wise lady.
Yeah.
That's just my little tidbit to
Yeah. Well, Ashley was amazing. Ashley was absolutely amazing. She, I'll tell you a little story about Ashley.
Please do. Please do.
We had Pastor Michael, I think he wanted to break us, to be honest. He brought us into some really difficult situations. Yeah. And he brought us to a youth offenders facility, which with 200 young people, 5 women, 5 girls. The rest of them were boys. And so we walked into this huge hall. At the end of the hall was almost like a jail thing with beds in it, and we had a tour, and it was devastating because these are young boys from the ages of 12 to 16. Yeah. And so they were young kids, and so we walked in, and you know, they're very solemn looking, these kids, and they basically had been locked up for a variety of different things. Stealing, some of them are just because they wouldn't listen to their parents, they were sent in there. Some kids were picked up off the street and such like this. And Ashley was very uncomfortable, and she said to me afterwards, she says, I didn't think that we should be there. And I was thinking, what is the sense of us being here? Like, this doesn't make any sense. We shouldn't be here. We shouldn't be doing this. This is wrong, and we're not going to have any effect on any of these kids. And so we stood up and we did our introductions and just talked to them. And right at the very end, for some reason, I just knew I had. So I turned to Ashley. I said, "Do you want to say anything?" And she stood up and talked. And at this moment, I can't remember what she talked about. I do.
She told me this.
Yeah. But she came across so incredibly genuine and so loving to these kids that I think she touched every heart in that room. And so, you know, but she went in there that day thinking, why she was so uncomfortable, and why was she doing this? And that happens. We had those experiences every day. Yeah. Every day.
Wow.
You know.
It sounds though like the group of ladies that you had on this team very much had an open mind and open heart. And I think it's pretty crucial to have both those things when going overseas and doing any kind of ministry. Having an open mind and open heart, because you don't know what those people need to hear.
That's right.
God does.
Yeah.
Open heart. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and you just have to be open to listening to them as well.
Yeah.
To listening to what they want, right? Rather than never going in with your own agenda. You know, just listening to what they want.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So key when you're working cross-culturally.
Yeah.
So with this trip compared to the other trips, did anything surprise you? Or is it just old hat?
It's never old hat.
No, it's true.
Never old hat. It's never old hat. I think that surprising. I think the surprising part is that we can still open our heart even more, and I think that like you think, okay, we got, I've done how many of these trips that I'd be a little bit tougher, and it still hits me. I remember when we first got over there, and some of the situations that we saw, especially more so since COVID, the poverty is even more dramatic. And I just remember thinking, how can both worlds exist at the same time? How can what I just came from, the night before I flew there, I'd gone to the Elton John concert in Vancouver, and that concert and the evening probably cost me more than it would cost to feed 6 families, for 6 months, and I, and how can those two things exist? So that it didn't surprise me, but it surprised me that I still have such a feeling of we're such a small little part of trying to help them.
Dare I say a drop in the bucket?
Drop in the bucket. And that is actually what we have always said. We, sometimes we talk about a drop in the bucket. Sometimes like we use a Mother Teresa saying as part of our mission statement, is that if we can change one person's life, if we can whether it's a drop in the bucket or a grain of sand, that we, by impacting one person, when we look at Uganda, we impacted Pastor Michael. Pastor Michael impacted and supported each of those 3 groups, and so now we've got
the ripple effect.
We've got several hundred people in the MPG area that are impacted as a result of this. We've got, I think that they've got 100 families that have got some income coming in as a result of that, and we've got families that are no longer fighting, that are recognizing that they are role modeling a way of living that is teaching their children. We saw more families that were coming to listen to what we were talking about, loving their children, listening to their children, and we didn't see that a lot in our first trips.
Okay.
Children were sort of put aside, and we saw more people that were, talking to their kids and listening to their kids, and so role modeling a way of empowering their children as well. So,
what is your mission statement for Eve?
I've got it somewhere in here. Where's my mission statement? I wrote it in here. We believe that every person has the right to live without fear of violence, and that leaders have the knowledge and ability to address issues in their community.
I love that.
Yeah. So,
what's Eve's plan? What's the 5 to 10 year plan?
5 to 10 year plan. There's a core of us that started with myself, Barbara, Deb Verbeek, Patty. Patty's been with us 6 years, and Shona. There's been a number of us that have been with the team right from the very beginning, from the inception. We're all getting older, and so right now our 10-year plan is to try and ensure that we are attracting and empowering new team members to continue on what we're doing. So trying to, because it's difficult to attract new members and say to them and they'll say to us, well, what am I going to be doing, or how can I have an important role in this team? And for us to just say, oh, you'll find out when you get over there, right? That doesn't generally work.
Especially for nurse personalities who are very
yes. So we did a more robust training this time prior to going.
Okay.
Without we went through everyone, because we do, like, we've got a training plan for the leadership training. We've got a sort of a training plan for different activities to do with children in schools, because we also go to schools, and then we also do women's health teaching. So all those are the three components of what we do. And then we take that and we adjust it when we're over there, but at least that gives new members a framework. And so we went through all of it, and this year we invited 3 new people to participate in all the training that are going to be coming to Kenya next year with us.
How exciting.
And so we've got,
amazing.
Yeah, and they happen to be nurses, but it doesn't have to be nurses that are coming along. So
okay.
Yeah, so that's part of it. The other part is being a little bit more intentional about fundraising, so that we don't have to. It gives us, I mean, our goal isn't to go over there and hand out money. That's always been, like, we're not, like, I know a lot of missions trips, they're going over and you're handing out things to people. That's not our focus. Our focus is to be giving of ourselves, to be giving of our knowledge, of our hearts. So we don't generally hand out a lot, but still having that little bit of money, it gave us the ability this time, like we were able to give Pastor Michael money for microloans for each of the groups, so that they can do microloans to start more industry.
Cool.
And also give them the information. So we'll give them a USB stick with all the education, and then they can actually print it out. They can use that in their communities. They can have events in their community if they wish to. So that's sort of those
brilliant setup.
Those two things. And like I said, we're looking at attrition planning, so that if something was to happen and I wasn't able to do it anymore, for some reason, that it would still carry on.
Well, let me put in a plug for you. If you are a nurse, or
anybody
who is passionate about the topics that we just talked about here, I will link Eve. You have a website, right?
We don't have a website.
No.
We've got a Facebook page.
Okay. Yeah. You can look up Eve's Facebook page, or just message Hungry for Life, and because the teams go through us, so we can definitely connect you. I know a lot of nurses. One redhead I'm thinking of who should join you. You know who you are. Anyways, very cool. I think that's kind of all. Did you want to add anything?
Just actually, one thing I do want to say is you asked about something that surprised me.
Yes.
And this time was Pastor Michael. I think it was on a Thursday or Friday or something like that. And he came to me and he asked me if I would be the main speaker in church at that Sunday. And I have never done anything like that. Never had to stand up in church. I do like to talk, but so that was something that surprised me, that I was capable of doing that.
Did you do it?
I did it. I absolutely did it.
You go, Debbie.
Yeah.
Way to go.
And it's something. It was really, really neat to do. Pastor Michael was in the back, and I said, how did I do? And he says, well, I had a whole bunch of paper wadded up right beside me. He says, I was going to throw at you if you said anything inappropriate. And he says, but you didn't, so we're okay here.
Michael. Pastor Michael.
One of the things that I did say there, though, that I think actually sort of empowers our team and getting people to, and the power of every member of our team to get people to talk and to, because I looked up, I found some passages from Proverbs, and the one was, the power to use words is a unique and powerful gift from God. Our words have the power to destroy and the power to build up. And that's and so that I was able to talk in church with the people, everybody that had come there to talk about how important it is to raise up your children so that they are raising their children to be powerful, to be empowered, to that by telling them that they are good, they will do good things. But if you tell them that they're dumb and they're no good, they're not going to. And so often children who are raised in poverty are put to one side. But we've seen that children even raised in poverty can actually be the leaders in their community, and so and a lot of that is just through the power of words from their families. Yeah, so
that's
yeah.
I do want to ask you one more thing. What, like, and maybe you covered it, but I want to open it up just in case. Personally, what impacted you the most from this past trip that you just went on? I mean, maybe we covered it. I don't know.
I think that, you know, there's so much that like I said, there was so many different experiences every day. That we could go from the lowest of low, seeing, you know, such poverty and such despair of people. We went to a women's prison, and that was very, very difficult to see that. And then we go to the highest of highs, that we'd go to, you know, work with a group in the community and to see how quickly they turned things around and how they developed plans and how much hope they had. But I think that this team, these women that I traveled with, they continue to surprise me in terms of how personally they have grown in this journey as well. Is it a surprise? No, because I know that they're amazing.
But kind of
they're amazing.
A neat twofold situation, right?
Yeah. So I don't know that anything really surprised me. I think, you know, after 2.5, 3 years at least of not traveling, just to find that we picked it back up really quickly. I'm always nervous when we go over there. How are we going to be, you know, like, we don't ever want to be seen as these people from a very rich country coming in here and trying to tell us what to do, and that's what we have to stay away from. We have to stay away from doing that. We just want to be real with people, and I think we did.
I think you've succeeded in that.
I think so.
And so your next trip is? Next
trip, we are currently in planning, just going to be starting to plan. We're going back to Kenya, so after 10 years. So we're going to be meeting later this week and actually planning our trip back to Kenya.
Nice. And when is that happening?
End of September.
Okay.
2023. Yeah.
Lots of time for people to jump on board, unless you have your team.
I think we've almost got a full team.
Okay, I'm joking.
Yeah. I think we almost do. We have to. It's difficult. It's balancing. We don't want to say no to anybody that wants to come, because we want them to experience it, because I think that everybody gets personal growth out of coming on these trips. But at the same time, we don't want it to be so large that we lose the focus of what we're doing, and you know, we're unable to take care of the people that are coming, because we see a lot of difficult things, and we have to take care of everybody that comes over so that the experience for them is positive as well. And when it gets to be too big, it's hard to do that.
Right. Yeah.
That
is very exciting.
I also I understand there's a new field partner in Dominica.
There is.
Dominican.
We do have a new field partner.
It's a possibility there could be 2 trips next year if we sort of.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. Well, hey, thanks again for taking the time out of your workday to come podcast with us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. And that's a wrap.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to What in the World, where we seek to educate and inspire. Here at Hungry for Life, we are passionate about your group having a global impact in eradicating needless suffering. For more information, head over to our website at hungryforlife.org. And you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you may listen to podcasts. Tune in every other week for another conversation about what is happening at Hungry for Life.